Hello everyone and welcome back to RPG PhD. I'm Dr. Ben and today we're diving into a topic I've wanted to talk about for a long time. How a nearly century-old technique can make your NPCs sharper, your scenes more evocative, and your worlds feel strangely alive without you having to become a theater performer behind the screen. We're talking about the work of Michael Chekhov, one of the most imaginative acting theorists we've ever had, whose ideas about gesture, atmosphere, and character energy map onto role-playing games so cleanly you'd think he wrote them with a game master sitting next to him. If you've ever thought, I want my characters to feel more distinct, but I don't want to do accents or perform, then Chekhov is your guy. And if you've ever wanted your table to feel the mood of a scene without you describing every tree root and wall sconce, Chekhov is really your guy. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's talk about how a little bit of actor theory can quietly transform the way you run games. Michael Chekhov was a Russian actor-director and one of the most influential acting theorists of the 20th century. A student of Konstantin Stanislavski and a nephew of Anton Chekhov, he eventually broke away from naturalism to develop his own system focused on imagination, energy, and what he called psychological gesture, a physical impulse that awakens a character's inner life. His major works, especially To the Actor, and his lectures compiled in On the Technique of Acting, outline a method that blends psychology, movement, and almost mystical sensitivity to atmosphere. Though created for stage and film, his techniques offer a surprisingly rich toolkit for anyone crafting characters or mood. Michael Chekhov believed something radical, at the time anyway, that characters aren't defined by psychology on a page. They're defined by impulse, by the way their inner life pushes outward into movement, energy, and atmosphere. Instead of asking, what is this character like, he asked, what does this character want to do in every moment? And that shift from analysis to impulse is exactly what makes his work so useful for game masters. We don't have time to write 5-page character studies for every NPC. And even if we did, none of that matters the moment players interact with them. What does matter is the shape of their behavior, how they speak, how they react, how they fill a room. Chekhov's tools let you generate those qualities instantly. Chekhov's most famous idea is the psychological gesture, a simple symbolic movement that captures a character's inner drive. Actors usually perform the gesture during rehearsal, then let the feeling of it color their performance. For game masters, it's a secret weapon. Pick one quick physical metaphor for your NPC: pushing away, reaching toward, grasping, lifting, shielding. And don't actually perform it at the table. That's right, you don't actually perform it. You just imagine doing it for a few seconds before you speak. And something weird and wonderful often happens. Your tone shifts, your phrasing adapts, your rhythm changes. Suddenly the scheming vizier feels invasive, the paladin sounds earnest and upright, and the rogue becomes slippery without you putting on a voice. Psychological gesture gives you consistency without rehearsal and depth without exposition. Think about the classic Clark Kent Superman split. That's psychological gesture in its purest form. Clark Kent carries a gesture of shrinking. Shoulders slightly hunched, elbows tucked in, hands fumbling with papers he doesn't actually need to fumble. You don't have to perform any of that at the table. Just imagine the hunch and hide gesture for a couple of seconds. And suddenly your voice gets softer, your phrasing gets timid, your whole NPC feels like they're trying not to take up space. Superman is the opposite. His gesture is expansion, chest lifted, spine long, fists planted on hips like the world is perfectly manageable from that vantage point. If you imagine that upright, confident hero stance. Even briefly before speaking, your tone sharpens, your tempo steadies, and the character radiates certainty without you narrating a single detail. That's the beauty of psychological gesture. You don't imitate the pose, you let the impulse of it color everything you say. One of Chekhov's simplest tools, the idea of centers, works beautifully for role playing games because it doesn't require learning a specific method. It's just a way of tuning yourself to an NPC before you speak. Chekhov taught that every character leads from a different part of their body: the head, the chest, the hips, the stomach. Again, you don't need to physically act any of this out at the table. You just imagine where this character's energy sits and let that color how you describe or voice them. A head-centered NPC comes off quick, curious, analytical. A chest-centered one feels bold, commanding, heroic. Someone centered in the hips reads as slippery, reactive, maybe flirtatious. Stomach-centered monsters feel predatory and grounded, like their instincts live closer to the floor. These subtle internal gestures change your timing and even the cadence of your sentences. Tiny shifts your players feel instantly, even if they can't name why the NPC suddenly has a distinct vibe. Chekhov spent a lot of time on atmosphere, not as a backdrop or aesthetic choice, but as the emotional pressure in the air before anyone says a word. It's the weather of the soul that permeates a place, shaping how people move, breathe, and speak inside of it. In role playing games, atmosphere is one of the most powerful tools a game master has because it gives you instant clarity without needing a half page of flowery description. All you have to do is choose a single atmosphere word before the scene starts. Melancholy, fevered, brittle, triumphant, suspicious, hollow, festive, oppressive. That one word becomes your compass. Once you've picked the atmosphere, everything else, your pacing, your word choice, your imagery, falls into place naturally. A melancholy forest doesn't require a novel's worth of detail. You mention the bowed branches, the way sound seems to get swallowed before it reaches the clearing, and players fill the rest. A suspicious tavern needs only the too quiet dice table and the way conversations half stop a beat too late. A fevered battlefield means details come in fast cuts, breathless and disjointed. You're not forcing yourself to invent the scene, you're letting the atmosphere choose the details for you. Atmosphere is also the game master's best friend during improvisation. When players surprise you, as they always do, you don't have to scramble for lore or remember what the innkeeper's uncle was doing in 1485. You just hold on to your atmosphere word. It acts like a tuning fork, keeping everything resonant, even while you're making it up on the fly. The result is cohesion. Players feel like the world has an internal emotional logic, even if you're inventing much of it in real time. Atmosphere becomes a guiding rail that keeps your improvisation coherent. I mentioned the next story in a comment recently while addressing the parallels between Christopher Alexander's works in architecture in evoking atmosphere and using Michael Chekhov's work. You can check out my video on Alexander's work linked below. Back in grad school, I actually participated in theatrical exercises using Michael Chekhov's method. One exercise on atmosphere was both simple and powerful. You'd go into different spaces, sit quietly, and just let yourself feel whatever that space evoked. No acting, no performing, no forcing anything. You just paid attention to what the room, its shape, sound, energy, and rhythm did to you emotionally. Sitting deep in the library book stacks had a very particular weight to it. It was quiet, focused, almost secretive. The food court at lunch was totally different. It was chaotic, social. It had a buzzing energy. A bench outside by the fountain had its own sort of emotion. It felt open, reflective, and unhurried. The point was that once you felt those atmospheres in your body, you can later recall them as an actor. If you need to play a scene set in a cathedral, for example, you can pull up the feeling of being in a vast, reverent space. If you need a cramped or anxious tone, you can remember being in a tight, fluorescent hallway. In acting, you internalize them to evoke a mood. In role playing games, you channel them into your descriptions to evoke that same mood at the table. Chekhov's movement qualities, things like molding, floating, flying, slashing, pressing, gliding, aren't just about how a character moves, they're about the energy they project into a space. Instead of using them to differentiate how NPCs move, although you certainly could, you can use them to signal what an NPC wants before they ever open their mouth. This is gold for game masters because players pick up on energy much faster than they pick up on exposition. A pressing merchant is someone who is pushing the conversation, pushing a deal, pushing an agenda. You don't need to say that he's desperate. The players can see it. A molding inquisitor shapes the party with steady pressure. Every question feels like a hand guiding them somewhere. A flying young noble flits from topic to topic, not because you described her movements, but because her attention dances unpredictably. A gliding assassin's calm, unbroken cadence telegraphs danger more effectively than any drawn weapon. The beauty is that you don't have to narrate much of this. You don't say he speaks in a pressing manner, you just let the energy lead your improv. If the character is slashing, your sentences get shorter, more pointed. If they're floating, your thoughts drift and your phrasing loosens. These qualities become intention cues, microsignals players pick up unconsciously. So NPC motives land faster, scenes stay sharper, and the whole table feels the emotional geometry of the moment without you ever needing a speech. Many game masters think prepping an encounter means stat blocks, motivations, and a few boxed text lines. Chekhov gives you something more primal, a way to set the emotional physics of a moment before anyone arrives in it. Before a major NPC steps into the spotlight, take a couple seconds and do their psychological gesture in your mind. Clench for a secretive noble, expand for a triumphant commander, pull upward for a priest trying to rise above their own doubt. That microgesture leaks into your voice, your pacing, even your pauses. Suddenly, the NPC feels lived in instead of recited. The same goes for the scene itself. Before a social conflict, choose an atmosphere word, just one, icy, festive, constricted. That single decision shapes the cadence of your delivery and the details you choose. An icy room gets clipped phrasing and too long silences. A festive tavern gets overlapping voices and bursts of color. For exploration scenes, pick a movement quality to guide how the environment behaves. A pressing dungeon squeezes players with narrowing passages and time pressure. A floating fey glen has details that drift in and out, never quite settling. You can even give entire locations a psychological gesture. An alleyway that closes in makes players instinctively lower their voices. A cathedral that lifts upward makes them speak in hushed tones. A forbidden library that pulls you deeper invites choices that feel like compulsion rather than curiosity. Once you start thinking this way, environments stop being backdrops. They become actors in the scene, shaping mood, influencing decisions, and silently steering the emotional journey right alongside you and your players. Villains especially get infinitely more interesting when you build them from a psychological gesture instead of a pile of cliches. A classic tyrant becomes terrifying the second you decide their core gesture is crushing. Everything they do, how they speak, how they stand, how their minions move, feels like downward pressure. They don't just issue orders, they step on people, socially and physically. You barely have to describe anything else. The energy tells the story. Or take a silver-tongued manipulator. If their gesture is reaching, then every interaction suddenly has a predatory, invasive quality. They lean in too close. They offer gifts that feel like obligations. Their words feel like fingers tapping at someone's ribs. Players will distrust them long before the plot or the story tells them to. Monsters work the same way. A demon whose atmosphere is smoldering hunger doesn't need a 4-sentence lore drop. You describe the way its gaze lingers, the way the air feels warm around it, and the table fills in the rest. A fake creature with a gliding movement quality becomes uncanny without you ever saying uncanny. A dragon with a pressing quality suddenly feels ancient and territorial instead of just big and toothy. The best part is that these choices stick. Because you're working from energy, gesture, atmosphere, movement quality, rather than a memorized set of details, you can recreate the villain perfectly 3 sessions later without flipping through notes or trying to remember what accent they had. Their presence becomes a rhythm your players recognize the moment you open your mouth. What I love about Chekhov's approach is that it doesn't add more homework to your Game Master binder. It quietly erases a lot of it. Instead of trying to remember 3 quirks, a specific accent, the NPC's family tree, and the exact phrasing you plan for their speech, you can hold on to one simple thing: a gesture, a center, or an atmosphere. That's it. Those choices act like an internal compass. They pull your improvisation into a coherent shape so you don't drift into bland, samey NPCs or scenes that feel emotionally flat. A psychological gesture or center does half the work for you. If you imagine a character pulling upward or pressing forward, again, your tone and pacing can naturally shift without effort. Atmosphere works the same way. Pick strained, festive, or grieving, and suddenly your descriptions, pauses, and sensory details all sync up on their own. And you're not juggling performance techniques unless you want to, you're just following a vibe. All this means you can improvise with confidence. NPCs stay distinct without you struggling to remember how you played them last session. Scenes feel intentional even when you're making them up on the spot. And instead of scrambling for the perfect line or the perfect description, you let the energy you choose do the heavy lifting. It's not about performing better, it's about giving your instincts a direction so they can handle the rest. Before we dive into the step-by-step tools, I want to make something clear. None of Chekhov's techniques necessarily require any sort of acting chops or theatrical flair. What you do need is a way to anchor your instincts so NPCs don't all sound the same and scenes don't wander and your improvisation has shape instead of static. They're fast, internal tools that let you give characters and scenes emotional clarity in just a few seconds. And you don't necessarily perform them unless you want. You just think them, and then your delivery shifts on its own. So let's break down how to use these methods as a game master. One simple technique at a time with examples you can apply immediately at the table. If your goal is to make an NPC feel consistent and motivated, then first, decide what this NPC wants in the scene. Keep it super simple. Do they want to push the PCs away, win them over, control them, cling to them, lift them up? Some simple psychological gestures might be pushing away, pulling toward, grabbing or clutching, reaching out, lifting up, shielding or protecting. Next, pick a gesture that matches that want. Again, you never have to perform it unless you want to. You just imagine it for a second or two. For example, your NPC is an old general who wants the party to toughen up and do the hard thing. So the gesture might be pushing forward, as if shoving someone into battle. You do the gesture in your mind before you speak. Literally, take a breath, and in your head you shove something forward. Then talk. Let it color your delivery, and don't overthink it. You might find yourself naturally using firmer phrasing, shorter sentences, or a more insistent tone. Enough waiting. We've seen what you're doing out there. Every hour you sit here, more villages burn. Get up, take your steel, and do something. The same NPC with a different gesture, say clutching, this would be someone who's afraid to lose them. Listen, I've buried too many kids in armor. Don't make me add your names to the list. If you're going, you go smart. You hear me? Same character sheet, completely different vibe. If your goal is to make each NPC feel physically different, first pick where their center lives. Head, this might be if they're mental, curious, anxious, calculating. Chest, if they're proud, heroic, emotional, dramatic. Hips, sly, playful, grounded, sensual. Stomach might be instinctive, predatory, stubborn. Now imagine them talking from that place. Head, voice up, lots of actually energy. Chest, open, declarative, confident. Hips, relaxed, sideways comments, teasing. Stomach, low, slow, deliberate. I'm not moving for you kind of energy. Next, apply it in one line of dialogue. For example, a head-centered scholar might say, if we cross-reference the sigils on the obelisk with the old guild records, we might, oh, that's interesting, look at that crack over there. Chest-centered paladin, we stand or fall together. I'll take the front. If anything breaks us, it goes through me first. A stomach-centered orc chieftain, you come into my valley, you talk, or you bleed. I do not care which. You don't have to describe any of this, although you certainly can. Just feeling the center of the character can help change how you speak. In other words, these traits can give you a way into character that's different than how you might have approached them in the past. If your goal is to make scenes feel coherent and distinct without walls of description, first, before the scene, pick one atmosphere word. Melancholy, feverish, brittle, festive, suffocating, suspicious, hollow, sacred. Then choose your details and pacing based on your word. So a melancholy forest might have bowed branches, soggy leaves, sounds swallowed by fog. A feverish market might be too many voices, bright colors, arguments that flare and vanish. Or a brittle throne room, polished floors, tight smiles, every word feels like it might crack. Then use 2 to 3 sensory details. Then stop. Don't lecture, drop a few cues, and then move on. For example, in a tavern, the atmosphere is suspicious. When you step inside, the conversations don't stop, but they bend. Voices dip. A pair of dice clacks onto the floor and just stays there. The barkeep watches you a moment too long before pretending not to. Players feel the mood. If your goal is to let players feel what an NPC is up to before you explain anything, think of how the energy moves. Pressing forward, insistent, gliding, smooth, unbroken, slightly eerie, slashing, sharp, abrupt, cutting, or floating, meandering, dreamy. First, decide the NPC's current energy quality. A guard captain interrogating, he might be pressing. A fey noble playing with mortals, gliding. An angry inquisitor, slashing. An absent-minded prophet, floating. Next, reflect that quality in your speech rhythm. Pressing, no, stop, listen. You were at the docks after midnight 3 nights in a row. Why? Or maybe gliding. Oh, you poor little things, you've wandered so far from home, and now you've stepped right into our dance. Longer phrases, no hard edges, and it flows. Here's a simple recipe for any big encounter, combat, negotiation, or revelation. First, pick an atmosphere for the scene. So, suffocating, electric, reverent, frantic. Then, pick a psychological gesture for the scene itself. Think of what the environment is doing emotionally. An alleyway is closing in, a cathedral is lifting upward, a forbidden archive is pulling deeper, or a battlefield is tearing apart. Next, pick a gesture or energy quality for the key NPC or monster. Reaching. A demon might be crushing, a ghost might be withdrawing, a knight is pressing. Then start the scene with one strong image that fits all three. So for example, a haunted archive, the atmosphere is hushed dread, and the scene gesture is pulling deeper, and the ghost scholar is withdrawing. The shelves here don't stand in rows so much as they lean toward a single black doorway at the back, like old men straining to hear a secret. As you enter, your footsteps feel too loud. A figure in a moth-eaten robe notices you. and then recoils, as if the sight of you stings. From there, you just keep pulling deeper in your descriptions and let the ghost's withdrawal shape how it talks. If you're working on a villain, decide what this villain does to people emotionally. Do they crush hope? Do they invade boundaries? Do they tempt? Do they smother? Do they devour? Next, turn that into a gesture or atmosphere. So a crusher gesture might be crushing downward. A manipulator gesture is reaching in. A devourer atmosphere might be smoldering hunger. A cold mastermind might be atmosphere glacial stillness. Let that drive every interaction. A crushing tyrant, for example. Your stories bore me, he says, leaning back on the throne. Kneel, or I'll show you how I make problems smaller. Short, downward language. Bore, kneel, smaller. Or maybe they are a reaching manipulator. You look exhausted. Sit, have some wine. Tell me what he promised you, and we'll see if I can't sweeten the deal. Everything is an invitation that feels like a hand inside your personal space. Or a smoldering demon. It looks at you the way a starving man looks at bread he's not yet allowed to touch. Even when it smiles, its jaw never quite closes. And then you can resummon them later with the same impulse. Next session, all you need to remember is this guy crushes, or this woman reaches, or this thing hungers. That's it. You're not doing Chekhov in any formal way. You're just stealing some very smart shortcuts to make your instinct sharper and your table's experience clearer. Michael Chekhov's work gives game masters a language for something we're already doing instinctively, shaping mood, behavior, and emotional energy at the table. His techniques help you build NPCs that resonate, scenes that breathe, and worlds that feel alive, not because of lore, but because of energy. You don't need to be a performer. You just need to use gesture, center, and atmosphere as quiet anchors behind the screen. They're deceptively simple tools for making your storytelling feel richer and more intentional. And that wraps up our video on Michael Chekhov's work. If you try this out your next session, or if you've ever tried it before, I'd like to hear what happened. So drop a story in the comments about an NPC or scene that suddenly clicked once it had a gesture or atmosphere. And if you want more deep dives into storytelling theory, techniques, and design tools that you can steal for your tabletop games, do hit the like, subscribe, and share this with the game master in your life who collects strange narrative tricks like magic items. And as always, thanks for watching. See you next time.